Welcome to the Providence College podcast. My name is Joe Carr, and our guest today is Bob Driscoll, a transformative leader and inspirational role model to many, who is retiring this month after 21 years as the athletic director here at Providence College. What's going through your mind these days, Bob, as you prepare for what's next in your life?
I'm excited, Joe. We couldn't have had a better year. Better to be lucky than good sometimes. But if you asked me to lay this thing out, going to the Sweet 16, the cross-country team has had a great year. Hockey just missed the NCAA tournament. Kids are graduating at a higher level. It's great to see everybody's faces again and receptions and parties. What do we have? 3,000 strong the other night out there at the ticket party. So I'm very happy about that. I'm happy Steve is going to be the next AD, so there's some continuity there for our coaches and staff. And, there's some good things happening in Friartown.
And your family, I'm sure, is looking forward to having you around a little bit more, or at least I guess that's what they're saying for now, right?
Do you believe that, Joe? I'm not sure.
I do.
I don't think my wife spent more than 10 minutes with me the last year, so we'll see how that works out. But, I'm excited to spend some time, especially go down to Florida where the weather is nice and warm, and I'm going to still be involved up here, and so I'm excited about it.
I'd like to start by talking about coaching, which it seems to me that's your real calling. In many ways. Who was a coach who influenced you early in your days playing sports?
Yeah, I had a couple, but the one that stands out is a gentleman named Walter Carew. He was my high school football coach, and ironically, he was also my English teacher. And I wasn't a great student at the time. I was more interested in sports, but he actually taught me that you could be good at both things and held me accountable for both. And I was a little bit of a wild man growing up and did some things that he held me accountable for that if it wasn't for him, I'm not sure I'd be sitting here. I had an incident where we got in trouble one day and he called me in the office and basically said, I was going to start you as a running back when I was a sophomore in high school. And he said, but, if you're not willing to make the commitment to do the things the right way, I'm not going to play. And it just stuck with me. And then he said, hey, you have an opportunity, God bless you with enough athletic talent, you could be the first person in your family to get an education, and you want to be a coach and a teacher. This is your way kind of out, if you will. And it stuck with me. And I was like 14 years old. And I remember when I was at the University of California, we won the Citrus Bowl, and we finished like 7th in the nation, and they gave me this really cool watch. And he was in his 80s at the time, so I went to visit him, and I gave him the watch and thanked him for taking interest in a young kid that could have went the other way. So I would say Walter Carew. He was a Korean War veteran and a hero, and so I still think about him.
Do you think you've had that influence on some other people around you too?
I don't think of it consciously, but what's been ironic is, I've kind of modeled him and my dad, who I loved dearly and was a great athlete as well, but didn't have the opportunity to go to college because he fought in World War II. But that was my goal, and it's been fascinating because I've had people call me from 20, 30, 40 years ago that I coached and just said, hey, I was thinking about you, saw you retire, just want to say thank you. We had this conversation. You may not remember it, but it really made a difference in my. So it's like paying it forward. And I'm an old guy now, so maybe that's what happens when you touch enough people. But that's been the fun part about it.
Well, I can tell you from my experience, you do have that effect on a lot of people, and a lot of people around here would say the same thing. Speaking of coaches, by now you've hired dozens. What do you look for?
I look for somebody that has energy and passion. I get attracted to that, and people who have almost an obsessive belief that they can be successful. That mindset, right? Ed has that, Nate has it. I think I've figured out people that have that, because you're not going to go right to the top of the mountain, nor you're going to stay there. There's going to be probably more challenging days than good days, and you have to have the grit and toughness to get through it. And I think energy and optimism is contagious, and if you have it naturally, and some people do, you're ahead of the curve. But if you don't, you have to figure out how do you walk in the door and have your game face on. That's why we have these wrist bracelets. Every day is game day. If you teach yourself that it's game day, after a while it becomes a habit, and people want to follow people that are trying to do something bigger than themselves.
Is it an oversimplification to say that picking and hiring coaches is the most important part of an athletic director's job?
Oh, I think it's the most important part of the job, and it's really hard. I've done it for a long time, and I've made a lot of mistakes, but you really never know what somebody's going to be like until they do the job. But the best indication of the future is what they've done in the past. And you look at Nate, who was up at Union College where I coached, and he actually took a job that was a Division III school and a Division I program with no infrastructure, not a lot of resources, and made it to the Frozen Four, and I thought, well, if he can do that there, imagine what he can do here with support. So, there are clues, like success leaves clues, and if they can do it someplace else, they can certainly do it at Providence.
Success leaves clues. I like that. I like that. When did you realize that you had struck gold with those two hires, in Ed Cooley and Nate Lehman, just really a few months apart, a little more than 10 years ago?
I guess when we won the championship. Think about it. We won the Big East championship in 14 and the national championship in 15. And, once you do that, I mean, they're iconic figures forever, right? And I think they'll be able to do that again. It gets harder. But, once somebody has success, it creates this credibility that attracts other people who want to be part of it. I mean, look at Ed, the National Coach of the Year. Did I ever think that was possible when he first came here? Even in my big dreams, and his big dreams, probably never thought that was possible. So they both continue to surprise me, as does the gentleman out there with his name on the track, Ray Tracy. Keeps producing Olympians, All-Americans. And, I mean, think what he's done over his career. Stunning, right?
And we're talking on Thursday and tomorrow, two of the track athletes will be participating in the NCAA in the 1500s, and one man and one woman. So competition's not quite done yet. This will drop after that's all happened, but that's a good indication that program is incredibly strong, and it's dangerous to start down this list. So we don't want to do that. But Ed Cooley and Nate Lehman are the most famous of your coaches. But boy, what a group of coaches you really have assembled here. That leads to sustainable success.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'm most proud of is we collectively have created a culture where people want to stay and coaches coach each other. My most enjoyable meeting is we meet once a month and we sit around the table and we have conversations of possibility. How do we get to the next level, and what are the things that somebody's doing that's transferable to somebody else? And it's a fun thing to do. Watch the best of the best sit around a table and talk how to get better.
Let's go back to talking a little bit about your days as an athlete, a very good one. You're in Halls of Fame, both your high school and at Ithaca College, your high school in Concord, Massachusetts. What was your best sport?
It's interesting. I think the one I loved the most was hockey because it was the most fun. The one that I think I learned the most was playing football because there weren't many days you weren't dinged up or injured, and I really liked hitting people, by just what I liked. But as a kid, the thing I really loved was baseball. I was a big baseball fan. I was a Carl Yastrzemski fan. My dad was a big Ted Williams fan, and growing up 12 miles from Fenway Park, I'd go all the time and just loved baseball. So I loved them all, and so as soon as football was over, I'd go to hockey, I'd go into baseball, and so I was hard. People used to ask me all the time, but the one that was the most fun probably was ice hockey because it's fun to skate, it's fun to score goals. There's a culture around it that is really inspiring. That's why it was such a great thing when we won the national championship. It was like it all come full circle.
Hockey people are great, that's for sure.
Phenomenal people. Yeah, you know that.
That's right. You told me a story once that you found yourself in the dugout at Fenway Park was it with Ted Williams or Yaz, or what was that story?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic. I was a freshman in high school, and my aunt, who lived across the street from me's boyfriend, was the equipment manager for the Red Sox and the Patriots. And it was in the World Series, 1967. They were playing the St. Louis Cardinals when the great Bob Gibson was pitching. And so we would go with a truck and pick up their equipment at the airport, bring it in, set up the locker room, and I got to sit in the dugout in 1967 during the Impossible Dream and met Bob Gibson. And I always knew I could be a professional athlete. I wasn't good enough, but that was my dream. And when you're around those kinds of people, I mean, that was a transformational moment for me as a 14-year-old kid.
So you found your way into coaching at the college level. When did you get the idea, though, that you might like to transition to becoming an athletics administrator?
It came out of the frustration that I wasn't as successful I wanted to be early on in coaching. Like, I was a head coach at 24 at baseball, and I took over a hockey team at that point, and I still was as good, if not better, than anybody that I was coaching, and never understood why they didn't have the same obsessive commitment and passion for it that I did. So I got frustrated as a coach because I was immature. So I did that until I only coached for about 8 years. And then one day I thought, could I be doing this when I was 50? And when you're 28, you think 50 is a million years off. And I was also an assistant AD, and I loved the idea of visioning and growing, and how does your job get bigger so you have an imprint on more people. And so I just one day decided I'm going to be an AD, and I applied for a job at a women's college in Oakland because I wanted to live in California because of the weather. Packed everything up in the back of a van and just drove to California. And what's ironic about that, if I wasn't crazy enough to do that, I never would have got the job at the University of California. I wouldn't be here today, but I was just following kind of my dream. Now, I think I could have been a really good coach because I've become a really good athletic director, but I like the job that I have because I get to be involved in all sports, in all types of ways.
And as we said a couple of minutes ago, you're still coaching.
I am
it's
coaching.
Just sort of a different way.
That's a really good point. I get to coach everybody. I get to coach coaches, student athletes. So I just have a broader band of people I hope that I can impact.
Who were some of the people who taught you how to do this job in California or even before you moved out there?
Well, my first boss at the University of California was a guy named Dave Maggart. He was an Olympic shot putter. He was a great football player at the University of California, and he gave me that opportunity to go to a big-time school. And he was old school. He was a tough, gritty guy. You know, if he shook your hand, his word meant something. He had integrity, and he wasn't afraid to confront difficult situations. And so I learned a lot from him, and he became my mentor. And to this day, we still talk. And he was almost like a father figure to me at one point because I never wanted to let him down. You know, I always looked at him as my coach, and I wanted to make him proud. So that's a pretty cool relationship. And then when I came here, I had a gentleman named Roland Todd who has been my life's coach for the past 30 years. He was the first basketball coach for the Portland Trail Blazers, great college player, and he taught me the concept of a conversation of possibility, about being open, honest, and direct, and about just really being a great teammate, and relationships are the keys to success. So I brought him here a lot, and I learned a lot from him. Then I took what I learned from him and then applied it in the way I do my own work.
Earlier this week, and on June 7th, in fact, Wednesday, June 7th, a big reception here on campus in honor of you on the occasion of your retirement, a standing room only crowd and a big room in the Rewarding Center for the Humanities. It was really, really great. To me, the highlight was you telling everybody the story of your arrival at PC, what brought you here, what made you realize this was the right place for you. Can you take us through that?
Well, you know, I'd gone through a very disappointing experience at Cal where I wanted to be the AD. I was the acting AD, and they ultimately gave the job to one of my teammates who was the crew coach who was on the committee. And it was, it was kind of like a political coup. And, you know, I was not a real political kind of guy. I just put my head down and did my work and thought it was my job. And then when that happened, I realized that I wanted to be at a place where your word meant something, that you didn't have to cover your butt with emails and be looking over your shoulders because other people had different agendas. And I kind of went back to my roots. I'm a small town guy. I'm a guy that if you tell me you're going to do something, I expect it, and vice versa, and that we're teammates, right? And that whole story about my friend that I've had since I was 5 years old walked into a restaurant, and he had a Cal jersey on, and a guy with a Providence jersey introduced himself. And long story short, he said, "Where'd you get the jersey?" He said, "My best friend is the acting AD at Cal." He said, "Well, tell him the Providence job is open." So he picked up the phone, called me, and then I thought, gives me a chance to come back home, be with my mom and dad. Providence has big-time hockey. I have to deal with the nightmare of football. And so I picked up the phone, called the headhunter, and I had to sell him on wanting to actually bring me in because it had been closed, the application. So I was able to convince him to fly me back. I told him I'd pay for my own flight. I'll go visit my parents. So they had me sequestered off campus and got a cab, came onto campus because I wanted to walk around. I wanted to go to the rink. I met a woman walking outside and asked her to show me, and she took me. And during the walk, all she did was tell me how she loved Providence College. Now, Joe, this place didn't look like it did today. I used the term, it looked like a bad high school, and almost got fired by Father Smith when I came. But I was so impressed with the kind of people. And then I met this really cool Dominican priest, Father Morris, who said to me after my interview, he said, "I did a good job." And I said, "Thank you, Father." He said, "We'll see you again." I said, "Why do you say that?" He said, "Because God brings those people to Providence College when it's their time." And I told my wife that story, and I said, I met this real cool Dominican priest, and he knows God personally, and he said, "I'm going to Friartown." It wasn't Friartown at the time. I coined that later on. It just felt like the right fit and that I could take everything I learned at Cal and bring it here. And it was small enough and relationships and building enough that maybe we could do some great things. And I was a little naive. I didn't realize what it would take, but it was the best decision I've ever made because just like you both sitting here, you're my friends and family, and we'll be there for life. And I'd lost that at Cal when my mentor, Dave Maggard, left. They lost what was important.
It's a great story about what's special about this place.
Yeah.
I think many people have experiences along similar lines. It's an amazing thing for sure. Changes in facilities, championships, student athletes graduating. These are things that are all well known about your accomplishments here. There's another thing, though, that is maybe a little less noticeable, but I think really, really important, and that is the identity and brand of the Providence College Athletic Department and Friar Sports and the effect that has on the college's identity and brand. And a couple of things come to mind. The moniker Friartown that you just mentioned, you came up with that. You came from Oakland, where you had been around the Raiders, and that had something to do with kind of the color scheme, the use of a little more silver. So take us through that, if you would, and your thoughts about identity and profile and what that means to the athletic department and the college.
Well, I learned that early in life. It's like following the Red Sox, the Celtics, the Bruins, for the colors, the uniforms, the traditions. That was powerful to me as a young boy. And then I really had that experience at Cal. They were called the Golden Bears, and if you walked anywhere, literally in the world, if you saw somebody with a Golden Bear hat on, you'd go by them and say, "Go Bears," right? And they used to call it Bear Territory, and they had a little saying, "You know it, you tell the story, you tell the whole damn world, this is Bear Territory." And you'd have 80,000 people chanting that, and your hair would stand on end. So when I came here, they didn't have any of that stuff. They didn't have pictures on the wall. The color, the schematics were different. Sometimes they were blue and not blue and gold. They were gold and what was it, white, or white and black and gold. It was all mixed up.
Pretty complicated.
And I lived in Oakland, and I was a big Raiders fan at the time, and I loved the colors of the Oakland Raiders, the black, white, and silver. So I changed it to black, white, and silver. And then I was sitting there one day. I said, "It's not Friar Nation. It's not Friar Country, and it's a small place like Boys Town." And I said, "Well, how about Friartown?" Just kind of popped into my head. And I thought, that's a good kind of fix. I do my best thinking in the shower. And then changed the colors. And then I came up with this concept. I had a good friend, Bruce Snyder, who was the head coach at Cal. And he used to have a saying, one at a time. One play at a time, one quarter at a time, one game at a time. You play that down, and then you move on to the next, whether it's good or bad. And I thought, well, how do you create something that's the same thing? So I said, well, every day's game day. As an athlete, if you have a competition, you're fired up, right? So let's create every day's game day. So, and then it started to build and grow, and I would end every speech with "Go Friars," and at first people thought it was crazy. But what's cool about it now, you walk around this campus and you see people with black, white, and silver. I'm in California, or I'm in Florida. I see people all the time when I have my gear on, "Go Friars." That has always been my dream, and now there's a culture around it that's important, but it took some doing early on and some buy-in. Or Ed Cooley walking around seeing somebody with a BC shirt, taking them to his office, making them take the shirt off and giving them another shirt. They walk away like, so. But you know that. You're a marketing branding guy, but it's cool when it gets sticky, right?
Right. Perfect word for it. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what we're looking for and what we've found with Friartown and everything that goes along with it. What a juncture in college sports. Name, image, and likeness. Leadership change coming at the NCAA. Talk of the big-time football schools breaking off on their own. What do you see when you look out to the future? What could be happening here?
I see uncertainty, but I see opportunity as well. I sat in Big East meetings, and this is a completely seismic shift in the history of the NCAA, and there's new leadership there, and this name, image, and likeness is really going to change the dynamics and pay to play. I see it coming. The thing I worry about is I think we can keep pace in the handful of sports we choose to, but I worry what's going to happen to the non-revenue sports, because in order to keep pace, money's going to have to come from some place, and there's going to be a cap, particularly a small school like Providence College. And maybe some of the non-revenue sports, maybe they end up not having scholarships and it's a Division III model. Maybe you have a regional competition when you're not getting on planes flying across the country. So there'll be certain programs and student athletes I think will be hurt by that in the long run. But I also think calmer minds may come to the fore, and maybe Congress will come up with a standardization that'll say, here's what we're going to do in college athletics. We've lost the narrative. I don't think we did a good job in the NCAA in terms of just managing this at all. The football schools are still going to get richer. I read an article the other day that said the SEC is going to double their income. They're paying out $100 million to every single school this year, and it could be as much as $200 million. They'll have too much money they won't even know how to spend. But I think we created the monster. When you pay coaches the kind of money we pay them, and then you tell student athletes, we can't give you a pair of sneakers, we've lost that, the court of public opinion. So that's on us. But I still think there's a place for a school like Providence College where you use sport to educate people, to actually be good human beings, get jobs. I mean, you got a better chance of being a neurosurgeon than you do being a professional athlete. So the focus externally is all in that group, but it's a small group, Joe. And eventually people are still going to play sports and people are going to want to watch it. But we have to make sure men's basketball continues to be successful, because that's the window to the world, right? Getting back to the branding and marketing of the institution.
And the culture, as you've defined it here, can still work, right?
Yes.
Because you can still compete for championships, be the most respected program around, and graduate all of your student athletes. These things can continue and still apply, right?
And we need it more now than ever. If everything is just a transaction, you kind of lost your whole purpose of why you have college athletics.
I'd like to talk about something that happened a few years ago that was critically important, especially as it relates to basketball. And you and Father Shanley were right in the middle of it. And it kind of happened. We all appreciate it, but I think it is worth going back to, and that is the creation of what this Big East has become. How challenging was that? What was the possibility that it wasn't going to work out like it did? Was this a pretty fraught time for colleges like PC when looking at putting the Big East back together after everything that had happened?
It's a really good question, Joe, because where we are today was radically different than we were, back in 2013. I remember sitting in meetings, and there was football and basketball schools, and we would meet collectively, and then the football schools would ask us to get up and leave so they could talk about football issues. And I picked that up right away, like, they're going in a different direction. So I started having our own meetings with just the basketball schools, planning the next scenario. And it's kind of ironic. I had a young man named Ryan Colton who's at Richmond right now, wanted to volunteer as a lawyer. So I asked him to put together a list of schools that if we ever separated, would they want to come, and what did their academic and athletic profile look like. So when it started moving that direction, I had a binder of all the possibilities, so we weren't blindsided by it. And then you saw the schools start to domino with BC and Syracuse and Pittsburgh and UConn and everybody else wanting to go their kind of separate ways. And we had a plan. And we also got, I would say, a little bit lucky, because Fox was starting their Fox Sports channel to go against ESPN, so they were looking for programming. We were looking to kind of go back to the future with the basketball-centric schools, and I give Father Shanley and the presidents great, and Jack DeJoy, who was kind of the visionary around this thing, and Fox Sports, and we put it together and then circumvented the whole football deal and went the other way and signed a big-time contract, and now it's the most basketball-centric program conference in the nation, longest running at Madison Square Garden, big-time conference, and won 2 national championships. And so we had a plan, but we also got pretty lucky.
What's the future for the Big East? What do you see?
I think more of the same. I mean, I was a proponent and actually worked hard to get UConn back in, much to the chagrin probably of our fans, but it has a great brand, and if you want to be the best, you have to play the best. And so it's helped us financially. It's helped us selling out games and such.
Sure.
We've talked about possible expansion, and you can kind of figure out who that might be, but I'm not sure that's going to work out at this point. So I think we do more of what we've done. We need to sign a new contract with Fox or someone else, but I'm hoping it's Fox for more money, and we're going to have to sign a long-term contract with Madison Square Garden to protect it and continue to hire the best coaches. You look at the new coach that just came in, and with Ed being the National Coach of the Year, I think we're going to be fine. And even if the football schools decide to do something different, they need the Big East. and they need the St. Peters of the world. They need the ones that make the NCAA tournament what it is today.
And certainly one thing about UConn is that elevates the women's basketball part of the conference massively.
And we need to be better at women's basketball. There's money to be made there, and there's no reason we can't be one of the best women's basketball conferences as well. And what Gino has done has been off the charts.
Speaking of the Big East, I can't recommend Dana O'Neill's new book, The Big East, enthusiastically enough. I've read it. I know Chris has read it. You may not have had time yet, but if you do in the coming months, it's just tremendous. And it really shows the Providence College fingerprints all over the founding of the Big East. Not only Dave Gavitt, but a lot of Mike Tranghese and even Dave Duffy from Duffy and Shanley, who, Father Shanley's father, his business partner, who was a 1961 alum, who's still actively involved in things. So it's a wonderful book, and really, really paints the story of the incredible development of the Big East from the early 1980s on.
Well, what's cool about that, too, is the fact that our fingerprints are on it again with what Ed has done and what Father has done and what we have done to be a major competitor in the Big East. I mean, there was a while we had kind of lost our way, but I think we're back right in the fray again.
You mentioned at the beginning, or when we started talking here a few minutes ago, Steve Napolillo, who will succeed you as athletic director. He's been at your right hand for many years, and we're all excited for him to take over and to be his partners in what's coming. But it's a great team, too. Jill LaPointe, Arthur Parks, John Rock, the list goes on and on. You have built a team here that can really carry things forward, and we think everybody feels great about the direction. How do you feel about turning it over to that group of people?
Well, I have great confidence in them. We've all been together for a long time, and as Chris is sitting here, 20 years later, look what he's doing, and they're all great teammates, and Steve will do a great job. I'm going to continue to help coach him and some other people, so I may be living in Florida, but I'll be coming back and forth because I have a love for Providence College and want to provide whatever support I can, because it's really all about people. And I always wanted Providence College to be a destination and not a stepping stone, and we've had some amazing people, but because we didn't create the culture and give them the tools to have sustainable long-term success, people left. Well, that's not the case. People want to come to Providence and come to Friartown. And I think the school recognizes the value that Providence College basketball and athletics brings to the institution. So rather than fighting against it like a lot of schools do, we're all kind of on the same page from top to bottom. And because we're small, we're SWAT-like, we're like a startup, we can make decisions and get stuff done quickly. So I think the future is even brighter, to be honest with you. It's like, I've always used this analogy, you're running in a marathon and you pass the baton on to the next person, you run as long, as hard as you can, and then let the next younger, fitter, brighter person take it to another level, right? You're just kind of a cog in the bigger picture.
Incidentally, we mentioned Father Shanley, and you talk about the future, and a lot of that relates to the leadership of the college. And now we have Father Sicard as the president. In a very short period of time, you turned him into an avid sports fan. Nice job there. And also so many trustees and others who really play a big role in making this a success.
Yeah, it's a fascinating place because I could pick up the phone now and call Chris Riley, who's the chairman of the Board of Trustees, and we can talk about sports, and he's good with that, or Mike Verwain, who's a major donor. It's a small world. It's all about relationships. And Father Sicard, who had the greatest experience ever this year. And so if you have a president talking about the value of that, and then you have Ed Cooley, who has this personality that's contagious. And there's just some really special people here, and that's what makes it great. And everybody wants to be good at what they do.
You haven't quite retired yet, so this may not be fair, but I suspect you may have begun to spend a little time reflecting. What are some of the things that you're most proud of or most pleased to think about as you reflect on the past 21 years?
The people, the relationships, like sitting with two friends here that are my teammates, sense of family, community, leaving it a better place than I found it, that my crazy dreams actually came through and were far exceeded. Got to spend time with my mom and dad, particularly as they passed, and my son went to school here. Yeah, there's a great feeling, I guess, of peace. That's the best word. Like, I feel I'm at peace now. I couldn't have done this 2 years ago, like during the pandemic. I just couldn't leave during that time. It's like you're letting your teammates and family down. I wanted to get us through that, and then to have this amazing year, which was beyond what I thought was possible. The dunk was the most amazing I'd ever seen it, ever. And to think all that stuff culminated in the year that I was retiring, it's like some days I wake up and say, how lucky am I? And I really feel that way. It's like I feel like a very, very lucky man, and have a wife and a family that loves me, and have friends. I feel lucky. I guess that's peaceful and very, very lucky and fortunate.
Oh, that's beautiful. 16-1 at home, and Taylor Swift to boot.
How about that?
That was pretty fun.
And she sent us a bunch of gear recently too.
That's pretty funny. You just used the phrase "leaving a place better than you found it." That's, I think, a pretty tidy definition of success and a job well done, and you have certainly done that. And I'm grateful. We all are, and we are so excited for you and your family to be able to take these steps to doing some different kinds of things, and delighted that you're going to continue to be part of our Providence College family. So congratulations. Thank you for your time today, and best wishes to all of you.
Thanks. I've always enjoyed this. This is always fun for me, and I appreciate it. And you guys are great teammates and friends. And, I'm going to be around. You'll see me.
Awesome.
Go Friars.
Go Friars. For Chris Judge, our producer, the Chris we've referred to several times in the past little while, I'm Joe Carr. Thanks for joining us. And Bob just said it as well as we can in 2 words. Go Friars.
Go Friars. Thanks, man.